I wanted to get out of the house as early as possible. With my mother being a stay-at-home mom, I realized that I also never wanted to do that. That is the hardest job.
Why is it so hard for you to be still?
15 years ago, Dana Pate landed her first big kid job as a leasing agent. From blowing up balloons and wind down Wednesdays, she rose to senior vice president of marketing, scaling her portfolio to over 100,000 units. Dana has led hundreds of initiatives to create, define, and execute seamless marketing solutions. Now, through Stitched Marketing, she's helping businesses transform their marketing impact.
I always feel like if I am not reaching for the next goal, my mind and my heart have a different take on what that is, and that's what I struggle with internally. And my husband literally the other day made me put the words nothing on the calendar.
If I'm not doing something, where is my growth?
If I still feel this way, then the new year, I need to.
Dana Pate, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Shiv. This is awesome.
I'm so excited. So we'll start with your upbringing. So what's the one thing you rarely talk about that people should know?
I love that you just go straight in for the we're going to start with something so simple. Let's just talk about your childhood and open up those doors.
Give me all your traumas.
Give me all your trauma. Okay, you sound like my therapist. Love it. So my upbringing was pretty average, I would say. I grew up in a pretty average middle-class family. Mom and dad are still married. Maybe they shouldn't be. But mom and dad are still married. I have a little brother and a little sister, so I'm the oldest. So very typical type A personality. I love to be in control, things to be pretty perfect. I grew up actually in New York. I was born in Staten Island, but moved down here to Atlanta with my family when I was probably early elementary school aged. So I was pretty much raised in Atlanta, which is nice, but I have the attitude of a New Yorker. So I can be very loud. I talk with my hands. I was worried about this mic for a good bit. But yeah, whenever I was growing up there, we had a really tight-knit family, extended half-brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles all the way around. And then when I hit elementary school and we moved down to Atlanta, it was just us down here. My parents hated New York with a passion. I think a lot of snowbirds do. And so they moved us down here and essentially traded in our duplex up there that we were paying crazy taxes for. And I was going to have to go to private school, and it was a whole thing to go to public school down here in a 5-bedroom, what I thought was a mansion, right, with a huge yard to play in. Didn't have to share a driveway or any space like that. And so life really changed for us at that point. But we didn't really have any family down here. So we would just hang out with each other a good bit. Neither of my parents worked to an extent. So my mom was a full-time homemaker since really the day I was born. And, really just provided for our family in that way, did all the cooking, the cleaning, took care of the errands and the bills and whatnot. And then my dad retired pretty shortly after, right before we moved down to Atlanta, really. And so I think I remember / I've seen pictures, and so it's one of those memories of where you were really young. Did you really remember it, or are you just kind of building a story in your head?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And I remember seeing pictures of my dad's 50th birthday / retirement party, and my mom handing him a little gift, and it's when he told her that he was pregnant with my sister. And so it was happy retirement. You thought things were going to get a lot easier now, but we have a newborn on the way. But he was retired, so both of my parents were at the house all the time. So when I say we grew up as a really close-knit family, they really didn't leave unless they were bringing us somewhere, dropping us off. My dad did a couple of odds and ends hobby jobs just to kind of keep him out there. He did Walmart stockroom for a little bit, I remember. He was a bus driver, which if you know my dad is the worst job fit personality type. He doesn't like kids. He doesn't like loud noises. He's not a great driver. But I guess, you're desperate for drivers. So I remember he was our bus driver all throughout really my middle school years. And so just again, doing odds and ends, my brother and sister were all very close to this day, but didn't really have any crazy, oh, woe is me kind of moments. I mean, I was a teenage girl at one point, so I built things up in my head. But always, because I think my parents were home so much, I wanted to get out, which is probably why I am the way I am a little bit. I can't really sit still for very long. I love to travel. I worked as soon as I could get a worker's permit at 15. I was working at the skating rink, hosting concession stand parties, and cleaning skate rentals and worked at the putt-putt golf course right next door, like blowing off the golf course with like that Ghostbuster backpack. So I did whatever I could to just kind of be busy and get out.
So you mentioned a lot of interesting things, a lot of similarities in my life as well. My mom was a real estate agent for the longest time, but when she started having kids, she ended up kind of doing that less often. My dad also retired somewhat early, so I also grew up very similar to you, with my parents kind of always in the house.
Do you guys have anywhere else to be? Like,
Yeah. So you said you're type A. Where do you think that comes from?
I think that's a great question. Like, is it a nurture versus nature?
And as an ancillary question, like, how are your siblings? Are they type A and type B as well?
Yeah, no, I'm the most type A for sure. I'm the oldest of 3, but I also have half brothers and sisters that are older than me. My dad we called him the first batch of kids. And then he met my mom and we had the second batch. So I'm technically in the birth order, like right kind of in the middle of the 6 of us. But I'm the oldest of my immediate, like who I grew up with day in and day out. And so I'm very much that typical, from a natural birth order standpoint. That way I'm very protective of my family. I'm also can be very aggressive with like my friends and the people that I love. And so I think that's just something that at an early age, I was always, don't pick on my little brother or sister, that's kind of my people. Only I could do that in a way. But no, they are, well, my youngest sister is an artist in Brooklyn. So she went swung the other pendulum. She's like, oh, blazers and 9 to 5 and a cubicle. She was like, that sounds really nice, Dana, but not for me. And so she's, on her own adventure there. And then my brother is a teacher. So he definitely is the much more compassionate of all of us too, and leads with intention. And he did Teach for America. And so he was in New Orleans for a good bit. And now he's in Taos, New Mexico doing that. And so we're all very different, but I will say that we're all very close. We don't talk on the phone all of the time, but when we see each other, when we do, we never split up. So
that's great. Growing up, what did you want to be? Did you have a dream job?
Oh, I mean, don't we all, right? I wanted to be a princess
Same.
or a model.
No,
I wanted to be a singer for a good bit until my mom had to sit down and have a real conversation with me about how I don't have a singing voice. And so that killed my dream at 5 or 6. She was always very much a realist. But I always had a very creative mindset. I was always, again, oldest kid, type A, putting on plays and shows with my friends and my family, and orchestrating and directing and doing those kinds of things on stage, but also off stage. So for a very long time, I thought about doing something in film. We're here in Atlanta, and so I was very drawn to, the Turner Broadcasting side of things, TNT. And I was looking at actually going to the New York Film Academy for a good portion of my high school years until my mom, again, good old Marianne, had another talk with me, and she was like, we don't have money for that. So why don't you go to a state school and get the Hope Scholarship so that you can, try and do something else? And so that's kind of what led me into marketing, because I was trying to figure out okay, I have this creative side of me that wants to be around other creatives, but I also have that analytical process, project management side. And so what's something that I can do that kind of combines those? And when I was kind of looking at here are the things that make you money, and here are the things that can kind of be fun, I kind of went into that field with a little bit of an open mind. So that's what I did in college, at least. So
you studied marketing?
I did, yes.
Okay.
I feel like I'm one of the very few people that went to school for what they're doing now. Right?
I am not. Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Okay. So how do you feel like that affected you? Because when I think about it, right, all of my friends' parents were working, or at least the dad in the family was working. How do you ever think about how that affected you?
Yeah, I think it makes me question sometimes where I find the drive to work so much, right? Because I didn't necessarily grow up where, my dad was bringing my Girl Scout cookie form to the office and helping me there. There was none of that. It was more or less oh, great, my parents are home again. Can we go to your house because your mom works nights as a nurse and we want to party? Let's go over there for the slumber party, not stay here. So I think, if anything, it made me appreciate kind of, again, they worked so hard early on that they were able to live off of, my dad's retirement package and their investments and whatnot. So it set that up, but it also made me want to do my own thing. I think, again, I wanted to get out of the house as early as possible. I started working really early. I worked a couple of jobs through college, like random positions, but just things that kept me out and about. And I was always, trying to travel with my friends as well, because my parents were home all the time, we didn't have additional income necessarily. We didn't go on a lot of family vacations. If we went anywhere, it was to New York to visit family, or we went to Disney twice, right? And so those were great trips, but otherwise we were, my mom would take us to Lake Lanier for the weekends, or, we would do kind of things around the house more than anything else. And so spring breaks, I didn't go on my first spring break trip until high school with some friends. There was no coming back with airbrush t-shirts and the braid in your hair. I was just oh, what are you doing? I was well, I think we're going to the library for a couple hours on Monday. And then, whatever's the park on Tuesday. So I think that if anything, their drive early on to set their family up so that they could spend time with us was important, but them being home all of the time really made me want to not be. And so I honestly looked at a lot of my friends' parents and kind of learned the business side of things, visiting their offices and going on vacations with them and kind of seeing them break out the laptop or, the phone in the car at the time and take calls. Because I had never heard business conversations before. My dad was just yelling at kids on a bus. That was my experience there. But yeah, I think it also, with my mother being a stay-at-home mom, I realized that I also never wanted to do that. That is the hardest job. And I had 2 kids of my own, and I was on maternity leave, and that almost killed me. I was I have to go back to work now. But I think seeing her day in and day out, making sure all the laundry was done, the kids were fed, we were at practices, we were doing this and that, that it showed me a whole appreciation for the people that don't traditionally work as well.
Why is it so hard for you to be still?
Ooh, I think...
And you'll give me an answer, but what's the deeper answer?
Yeah. Have you ever just watched Shark Week?
No.
You've never watched Shark Week? Okay, that's a side conversation. Oh my gosh, first of all, I grew up watching Shark Week. I don't know why I'm obsessed with those animals, but it's a, fear, flight versus interesting kind of a concept. But sharks and I guess fish in general, I don't know about other fish, but if they stop moving, they die. And I think that I always feel if I am not reaching for the next goal or looking for the next peak or, again, finding ambition for what's next, and I'm just still with myself and kind of stagnant, that all of a sudden I'm complacent or I'm lazy or I'm just not being productive. And I have a really hard time, even on days off, where I'm just sitting around doing nothing. And I know you need days like that. Everyone you need to recharge. I get that. Sometimes my body shuts down, it makes me sick. And they're just hey, you need to sit here, chug some Dayquil and watch some Love is Blind. That's what you need today. You have to fill your cup, right? But I think that my mind and my heart have a different take on what that is. And that's what I struggle with internally. And that's why I always have to be doing something, or at least looking forward to doing something. There's a rare weekend where we have nothing to do. My husband literally the other day made me put the words nothing on the calendar for a Saturday and Sunday so that we would have nothing scheduled. He was if you see something blank on the calendar, you will put something there. So I need you to write nothing. And so I went through the exercise and I literally put it. So that can be a thing
that you're doing.
Yes.
It's actionable.
It has to be. I have to time block nothing. I have to time block my lunches. Otherwise I will just, get kind of in a flow state and work right through it and be oh, wait, I forgot to eat today. I should not do that.
So I have a very similar operating system. I feel I definitely need to always be doing something. And it's something I've thought a lot about, right? And the question I ask myself is why do I feel that way? And the answer I've come to, at least right now, is a lot of it is driven around the feeling of inadequacy in some way, right? If I'm not doing something, where is my worth? My worth is only tied to my production in society. And it's hard because the thing is you can be driven by 2 things. You can be driven by the love of creation, or you can be driven by the fear of not feeling enough, the insecurity of, imposter syndrome or whatever it is. How do you look at that percentage for you in terms of being driven by the love of creating versus the fear of insecurity?
I think it depends on the day. I think if you were to look at kind of that state of mind of when you're feeling on top of your game and super motivated and like things are all working out, like that's your peak. And then there are some days where it's just like, I woke up literally on the wrong side of the bed, or like my contact won't go in right, and like I'm missing an earring, and like the day just gets off track pretty quick. And even throughout the day, you have one meeting that you go into and you're like, oh, that was awesome. Like I owned it. They were feeling it. Like I feel so productive. We have good takeaway actions. Like this is a great relationship. And there's some meetings where I'm just like, what the F just happened? Like, why am I doing this? I can't believe they're paying. Like, this is not, I should give them their money back. This is not a good opportunity at all. And so imposter syndrome is something I think everybody deals with, whether you're on top of your game or, at the end of it and rock bottom. But I think for me, imposter syndrome is one of those things that it helps ground me when I think about the perspective that everyone else goes through this. Like I listen to a lot of podcasts or read a lot of books or just have a lot of great conversations with people that I'm not the only one feeling this way. And I have to look at myself in the mirror sometimes and be like, you're not special. Whether you had a great day or a bad day, like things can change so much. So enjoy the ride as much as possible, but understand that, even the best of the best, Elon Musk has days where he's just like, am I doing the right thing? I mean, maybe he doesn't, but you would think that he would.
Totally. In terms of your, it sounds like you swing from good days to bad days. What would you say your general, emotional outlook on life is? Are you a half glass full? Are you a realist?
I'm both of those things. I'm definitely a half glass full, especially as of late. I think a couple of years ago, especially when COVID hit, I had a 6-month-old when that happened. Work was crazy. Everyone was not sure what was going on. The year after that, my mom got really sick and was diagnosed with colon cancer. My husband was having heart problems literally within the same week. Everyone is okay now, which is great. So I think your life flows depending on what situations, whether external or internal, are happening to you. And so I think where I sit today, especially in the decisions that I've made in the last year to leave my corporate job, to start my own thing, to really own my own schedule and figure out the people that I want to have partnerships and relationships with, I'm very close to the chest when it comes to my friends and family. I don't just kind of let anyone in. I don't have a lot of these kinds of conversations. Being deep makes me a little bit uncomfortable in that respect. But I think as of today, and really the last few months, have been life-changing for me. So many people have, gone out of their way to support and to show kindness in this jump that I've taken into entrepreneurship. And so I think that today is a really good day. This is a really good season of life for me. And so I'm also kind of on that mission of, if I'm in a really good, positive place, I want to expand that to others, so that if they were me a couple of years ago and they're in a job where they're just not sure if it's the right fit for them anymore, or they're having personal relationship issues and whatnot, what is that light at the end of the tunnel that can show them life gets better? And you can do things in your mind to help that, and surround yourself by people that are positive. Because if it wasn't for my friends and family being incredibly supportive, I never would have jumped. I would probably still be doing the same thing that I've been doing, and just kind of being, in a fog of day in and day out.
So let's talk about that. So the transition, you transitioned this year.
I did.
Okay.
I did.
And you talked a little bit about how you feel, but walk us through what was the internal monologue 6 months before, 3 months before, 24 hours before you made the
Oh my God,
change?
So much crying. So much when it goes back to, again, imposter syndrome of, who am I to think that I deserve better or different or more? Because I will say, the organization that I was with previously, I was there for almost 12 years. I grew up there. Like the people that were there, the relationships that I built. I grew a team from just me to 23 people. So every single one of those hires was critically important to me. Some of them had been with me for 10 years. We grew an organization from, I got there and there were maybe like 6 properties, so like 2,500 units. I left and we had just hit 100,000. So that scale of going through the process and again, growing with those people and being able to do different things and work really fast and quick, that filled my bucket for a very long time. But I grew up there. I was a kid when I walked through those doors, and I was a woman. I was a mom of 2 when I left. And so there was something about the consistency of that, even though we were rapidly growing and changing, but always having the structure and the constant of the same people with the same support, and we all kind of going through the same goals, that kept me there for that long. But really over the last few years, I had been struggling with, okay, there's something else that's pulling me to do something else. And do I follow that invisible string and that tug and see, why am I so unhappy when things to the outside world should make me so happy, right? Like I'm on the top of my game. I'm working for a really well-respected company with great people. I run the marketing team. I'm doing corporate marketing and public relations. Like I'm kind of like living the dream, right? Like things are good. I'm traveling. I have a great home front, but I still wasn't satisfied. And I had a lot of conversations with my husband, who always keeps me very humble, like my mother. Like, hey, you can't sing. Hey, we have a mortgage. Like, you can't just not work. And so I think I was just, going through the motions for a little bit. And I put a line in the sand, like I do with some things, where I'm just like, okay, if I still feel this way come October, November, then the new year, I need to make a change, and this will be my year. And I think I also started having a lot more conversations with people and being open. I'm definitely not the most emotional person that you'll meet, but again, if you're in my inner circle, then I cry a lot. But I had a lot of conversations with people that either had done the jump or at least had been with organizations for as long as I had been with mine, and they went somewhere else. And I was just like, how did you do it? And I just asked a lot of questions about, what should I be concerned about? Am I making the right move? And every single one of them said, listen, it might not be exactly what you want to do, but me staying there wouldn't have pushed me out of my comfort zone enough to bring me to the lessons that I learned afterwards and where I am today. And so hearing enough of that, and then honestly, my husband, like, again, very much the realist. I always joke that he holds me back on a lot, because I would be doing a lot of crazy stuff if he would say yes to everything that I ask him. But he turned to me and he was like, listen, like, you've been having a lot of conversations, you've had a lot of thoughts, looking at our finances, like, we'd be okay for a few months. So if this is something that you really want to do, you should do it. And hearing, I think, him say that, I mean, we've been together since we were kids. So, I went from my parents' house, of them always being there, to my husband, who's been a rock for me. But don't tell him I said that, because it's like part of our thing. But I think hearing him say, like, it sounds like you should just do it, and financially we're good for a few months, do it. And that's when I started putting the pieces together of, okay, I'm definitely leaving. Do I want to go work for another company? I looked outside of multifamily for a little bit. I applied for some random LinkedIn jobs, because I was like, oh, like, marketing is such a transferable skill. Can I do hotels? Can I do, airlines? Like Delta's here, IHG is here. There's got to be a perk, because I really don't need an apartment. How did I get in this industry, right? Like, I don't need an apartment. There's got to be some other perks. But when I was kind of going through some of this process, I was like, you know what? The people are what I'm so drawn to, and why I've stayed in multifamily for so long, why I was with my organization for so long. I was like, to start over completely, like start over in a new industry and a new job, just wasn't, I was like, that just doesn't seem rational. Like, I'm a risk taker to an extent, but I want to make sure that I have that soft landing. And so I was kind of looking through, like, again, apartmentalized lists, OpTech lists. I was like, are any of these groups kind of something that I am interested in pursuing and being a part of and building? And the answer was no. There was nothing that was pulling me to any groups that I was either talking to or had been with. And I was just like, if anything, I think I need to lean into this entrepreneurial tug that I'm feeling. While I was with my last firm, I actually had a side hustle with one of my friends we called Craft Happy. We did it for almost 4 years, which is crazy to think about. I joke that it's my in between my kid and a half, because I had my first daughter and then we started Craft Happy and then I had my second daughter. I was like, but this is like my middle child. And we essentially hosted events at apartment communities. We started out doing in-person events to kind of activate those amenity spaces. We saw a need, like, again, we were both in marketing at the time for the same organization at least. And we were seeing all these empty, beautiful spaces that we were taking photos of and that we were like putting social calendars together, but nobody was really engaging in them. You know, people would come down and they grab a slice of pizza and a glass of wine, and then they go back up to their apartment, or they talk to the same 2 people that they came down with. And we were starting to do different classes like hand lettering, and she had gone to like a chunky blanket making class. And it's one of those things that you would go to these classes. It was taught by someone local in the community. You learn a skill, but you'd sit next to people that you had no idea who they are, but you'd strike up a conversation, because it wasn't like an awkward speed dating where like, tell me everything about you. It was like, hey, we're doing something with our hands, we're building activities. So we essentially took that concept and moved it into apartments. COVID hit, so we went virtual. But that was so incredibly satisfying to build, to name it, to build a brand around it, to not have to ask permission from a committee or 10 other people and, you know, stakeholders and all these things like we did with apartment communities, and just to fully own every piece of that was so fulfilling to me. And so when that ended, that's where I think I saw like the biggest gap. I was like, wow, now I'm just going back to one job and doing the same kind of things, and this is not doing it for me anymore. And so I think I took that experience and was like, well, when was the last time I was really happy and fulfilled? It was doing my own thing. And so when this opportunity came over and I was just like, okay, I drew my line in the sand, the date came, the date went, and I was like, all right, let's start putting pen to paper. Let's make an LLC. Let's figure out the bank account situation. Let's get an accountant for sure. Like, I'm not going to prison over this. And so then I jumped, and the conversations in my head leading up to the day I gave notice were so all over the place. Like, talk about, again, like the ebbs and flows. It was one day I was like, I hate this place. I'm so happy that I'm leaving. And then the next day I was like, I can't believe like this is going to be one of my last meetings. This is one of my last like holiday parties. And I scheduled it out to like tell certain people, and I project managed my departure to a T. I was like, okay, I'm going to tell my boss at 10 a.m. on this day, and then I'm going to call my direct report at 10:31, and then I'm going to tell this person. And like, I had a list of people that I personally wanted to talk to, because I had seen so many people leave the organization really over the last year and a half, and they were just gone all of a sudden, or somebody else told their news for them. So I was really particular about how I told the people that had worked with me for 10 years that I wasn't going to be here in a couple of weeks. And also that this was what I was doing. I'm not going to another organization because I don't think that there's anyone that's doing it better than us. So I'm going to go and try it myself, try and help other companies with kind of fractional work, different support, and really, again, just see where it takes me. And yeah, I mean, the second I got in the parking lot on my last day, I burst into tears. And I was like, what did I do? Is this really what I want? I ran away to the beach that weekend because I was like, I just need to stare at the ocean. Like, is this right? Did I mess up? Do I need to go back on Monday and ask for my job back? And the very next day, like, I got a couple of messages from people after I like posted on LinkedIn and made it public. And they were like, hey, can we talk? I'd love to chat with you about bringing you in and doing this. And I was like, oh, I think we're onto something.
It's really cool. I've noticed this too. Usually when you're doing something good or great, there are very early micro signals that people will indicate. It's kind of like when you post on LinkedIn and in the first 3 minutes you get 8 likes, you're like, okay, you know this post is going to blow off.
It resonates, right?
It resonates, right? So I think the early signals are super important. And for anybody listening, when I was transitioning from my job to doing my own thing, there's this common belief that you have to just like jump in the deep end and burn the boats and take the plunge and like, this is all in or all out. And I think that can be true for some businesses, but for a lot of businesses, it's the Dana Pate style, get a side hustle and test the waters and figure out what you like and get feedback. Because you can get a lot of signal from people if you're onto something, and you don't have to like make this like massive plunge.
Yes.
And I think that's important for people to know.
Yeah.
Because the fear, my biggest gripe and something that I really hope to impact the world in is there's so much locked potential, and people are either taking that to the grave or keeping it in their jobs. And I think that the biggest thing that's holding people back is fear, right?
Very much so.
If you can just get some signal without taking the big risk, you'll feel a lot more comfortable. I think you mentioned something that was really interesting to me too, which is, when you were making this decision, you talked to a bunch of people.
Yes.
And all of those people were like, oh yeah, do it. This is a great idea. So what happened? Your reality in some ways kind of got distorted. You were like, yeah, this is great.
Yes.
And even for me, when I was doing my own thing, I listened to so many, why I'm doing this is I listened to so many podcasts, and I heard all these stories of people that were inspired by something or took this plunge or how they built their company. So in my mind, it was like, of course I can do this. Yeah. Because my reality was in some ways distorted. I was ignoring the fact that 99 out of 100 companies fail and one succeed. And all I was thinking about was the one that succeeded. So I think it's like really important to both infiltrate your mind with like a lot of positive people. And there's a quote that I really like that I think I've already mentioned on this podcast, but I really like it. It's mute the world and build your own.
Ooh, I love that.
I think it's by David Senra, this guy who started this podcast called Founders. And I think it's really important, right? You hear a lot from people, both good and bad. And in some ways you almost want to you want to listen to the good, but you should just like move in silence. And like things can be good and things can be bad, but you don't want to get swayed by the good advice, the bad advice. You just want to focus on doing the thing. Yeah.
One piece of advice I got whenever I was having those conversations was it was a book referral, and it was feel the fear and do it anyway. And it was like, if you ignore that there's going to be fear or pain or discomfort associated with any kind of change, then you're a little insane, right? Like, of course this isn't going to go smoothly. But you move forward understanding that it's going to be a little bit rocky. You're going to lose your footing at some point. But the point is to keep going and take those little steps. Like, I have 2 little girls, and so we are always watching Frozen and Frozen 2. And there's a song in Frozen 2 sung by Anna's character. And essentially she just goes like, do the next right thing. And that, I mean, again, crying, that is such an impactful, like beautiful, animated song, but it's always about like, hey, like things aren't going to always go the way that you intend them to go. You can plan out everything in your life. You can think, oh, I'm going to be a CMO at this, because that was what I thought I was doing. I got in with a great company that was growing. It was a startup, essentially. We grew. I was definitely a part of the leadership team, and I wanted to be more and bigger. And they essentially said, no, I think you're good where you are. And so I was doing kind of, again, the same things. We were growing so much, but we were also kind of at that stabilization point. And when you hear the word no, it can either pull you under and stop you in your tracks, or that can be what propels you forward. And for me, every no that I've ever gotten, whether it was no, you're not right for this deal, or no, we're going to go with a different management company this time, or no, like, I know you really want that promotion, but we're just not looking for that. We don't need a CMO right now. So you're going to stay in this like VP kind of a thing over property management. I was like, you know what? I don't have to take no for an answer. I can make my own yes. And so it takes one yes, whether it's from yourself or from somebody else, to really change your entire life and your perspective. And so I think, again, approaching risk with that mindset of, hey, some of this is going to suck, but most of it's going to be amazing. So you have to almost have that irrational belief that, 99 companies fair, but mine's going to be the one that makes it, right?
Totally. And I think there's the irrational belief, and there's also another favorite quote of mine is, self-belief is nothing but building an indisputable stack of evidence that makes you believe what you're doing is worthwhile. Yeah. So for example, like in some ways, if you believe something, with no evidence, it could be called delusion, right? Because there's no evidence, right? It could be called delusion. And that's fine. It's good to have a little bit of a delusion.
Yes.
But I think what you also notice is the more evidence you can build that you can do something, the more self-belief you will have, right? So I think it's really important for people to kind of think about that.
Yeah, well, it goes back to that imposter syndrome. Like when I am having those days where I'm like, do I really belong on the list of amazing podcast guests that you have on here? I'm like, Shiv's really asking me, like, I'm Dana, like, I'm just, a marketing girl in Atlanta. And yeah, like I've worked for a big company. I'm starting my own thing and whatnot, but like, do I deserve to be here? And then you almost have to like, sometimes I'm going to admit something that's very, very strange. But I can't be the only one that does this. I will go on my LinkedIn page and I will just scroll my posts because I'm not an over poster, I don't think, by any means, but I try and get on there and actively showcase like projects that I'm working on, and especially at my last company, like my team and whatnot, and what we're doing. And so I will go on there and be like, oh, like, you know what? It's almost like my resume. I'm like, I've done some really cool things and I've done it with some really amazing people. I actually do have value and I do know what I'm talking about and I do have a leg to stand on. So yeah, of course Shiv asked me to be on his podcast, right? Like,
there we go.
But sometimes you have to do that. You have to talk to the right people, or even just find it again in yourself to be like, you know what? No, like I've done some cool stuff, or there's people that have done less than me that are in more important positions or have more notoriety or have more celeb status essentially in our industry. And so, yeah, I deserve to be on that stage with them.
100%,
right?
100%. So what's been the hardest thing in the transition? Like, what has been the objectively hardest thing? And then what has been the hardest thing that surprised you that it was hard?
Ooh, those are great questions. I think the hardest thing, period, is just finding a new routine of sorts. And also just trying to figure out how much I can take on and want to take on. Because I joke, I have champagne problems. I've done exceptionally well for myself in terms of like inbound leads. And the second, again, like I mentioned earlier, I posted on LinkedIn that I was leaving. Then the next day I posted that I was going out on my own. Boom, like my phone's ringing, my DMs are blowing up. And I had really great conversations that first week that led me to some incredible, like really fun projects, some ongoing retainers now. So I don't feel the need to try and constantly be selling myself. I'm just focused on doing a really good job for the people that, I'm doing work for. But on that same kind of cusp, it's the difficult part of saying no or trying to figure out how I can squeeze in other people as they're coming in, right? Like our initial conversation was, hey, I'm Shiv with Zuma, and I'm looking at doing these things, like, can you help me? And I was super excited about the opportunity. And again, I want to work with like really cool people and on cool things. And I got back like, after I had my day and whatnot, I was kind of thinking about it that night, and I was like looking at my schedule and I was like, I wanted to do my own thing so I could have my own schedule. And if I stress myself out for the next 30 days trying to do an amazing job for what you were trying to do, then that's going to put, my family is going to be probably feeling the stress that I'm going to be feeling. Yeah, I'll have more money in my bank account, but am I going to be happier at the end of the day? And I wouldn't be. And so, I essentially like referred you to somebody else that could do a great job too.
Rejected me.
I did not.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Kindly.
For those that are listening, Dana's super busy. Has too much work.
No, but like that's honestly, like when you talk about like the hardest things, telling people no or referring them, like I want to help people so much, which is why I started my own thing. I just want to help more people doing what I was doing previously. And so when I'm not able to, that's an internal struggle I deal with a lot. And again, it's champagne problem. It's like, oh no, you have too much work and you have to tell people, and it's like, but that's what I struggle with the most because I want to grow. And I've had a lot of people ask me if I'm going to start like bringing on more people, because right now it's me and I have like some independent contractors that I kind of work with, but I like right now the control that it allows me to do with working with just me on a lot of these accounts, or outsourcing a few things here and there. But really, when you hire Stitched, you're hiring me and my expertise and my personality and whatnot. And so I think the future problems that I'll feel are definitely of that. How do I scale this? Do I want to scale it? And what's kind of the next phase as I go into year 2 almost.
What role does your husband play in terms of you venturing on? We talked about it a little bit, but maybe we can go a little bit deeper. And then how do you think about like balance?
Yeah. Well, my husband's awesome. Like, he probably won't even listen to this because, again, I tell you, he keeps me humble. He was asking me on the way out the door this morning. He was like, "What are you doing again?" And I was like, "I told you I'm doing a podcast." He's like, "Okay, so fancy." Like, and he just, lets me go. But he is the most constant, like stagnant piece of my life. But he also, again, like, he's a realist. So he will let me jump, but he'll keep that bungee cord pulled tight, right? He's not going to let me fall. He's not going to let me fester. And I've, again, been with him so long. We met when I was 16 and he was 17, working at Outback Steakhouse. I was the host and he was the busboy.
Wow.
Good old high school romance. We got married when I was 23. And so we've grown up together. So we've, changed our personalities and we've gone through different friend groups and whatnot. We've had 2 kids and gone through family stuff. And so for me, he's always just like the one that's always there. He's my best friend. And I think that when you have a good support structure in your life, whether that's your spouse or your parents or your best friends or coworkers and whatnot, then that gives you the confidence to do things that you might not otherwise do, because you know that they're always going to be there to love and support you, even if they're like, "That was the stupidest thing that you could have ever done," or "I wouldn't have done it that way," having those real conversations, but also knowing that they're not going to like walk out the door on you because you do something stupid. That's been super helpful. And I mean, he's a great dad. He helps with the kids all the time. I have a lot of friends that have husbands that are like, "Nope, I make the money, I do the work, you do everything else," even if they're working part-time and whatnot. But he's very much equal. Like, he does all the cooking. He helps with the cleaning. I do all the laundry. So we, balance each other out that way. But I think of work-life balance, it's more of a blend. It always has been for me, which is probably why I was able to put in the extra hours when I was younger and kind of scale up my last company and do the part-time hustle thing too. I mean, I had 2 young kids at home when I was doing a full-time corporate running marketing for a huge organization. And then in the early morning hours or late at night, I was booking, watercolor artists at a property in Charlotte for like the following week, right? So I was doing a whole lot, but I was also able to do that because I know I had the support structure that whatever I was dropping, he was going to help pick up.
I think a lot about my life is very simple right now in some ways, right? I'm not married. I don't have kids or anything like that. I'm free. Yeah. And as I think about where I place my time, it's really in just a few buckets, right? Work is obviously a big thing. My health, and then friends. And as I think about adding complexity in my life, adding a significant other, adding kids, I find it hard to understand where that time will go because we have the same amount of time. So the question for you is like, as you've added this complexity in your life with, more work, taking on more things, like what has fallen through the wayside?
Ooh. I think it ebbs and flows for sure. When I was obviously like working, 60 hours a week in Atlanta, and especially when I was commuting in and out of the city. And then I also had the side hustle at night. Like, I wasn't working out necessarily, right? Like, I was eating healthy enough because I probably forgot to eat. And so I was just trying to grab, some things, or my husband was cooking, which was great. And he keeps us on track most of the time. But I think that as you add more components, so, again, my husband and I have been together for forever, so he's kind of always been there. So I've always had my time with him. But adding kids is a whole nother element. And so you just shift your priorities as much as you can. And how I've always thought about it is like, I'm going to work as hard as I can with the time that I have during my work hours so that I can be present for whenever it's family time or whatever else. But I'm also going to run as fast as I can and as hard as I can so that when I get to that phase of my life, so when I was ready to have kids, I felt confident in my career and where I had gotten, and I felt ready. And I know people always say like, "Oh, you're never really ready for kids. You're never really ready for any of these things." I was as ready as I was going to be knowing and watching other people in my life do it. I think it helps when you have role models or mentors or other people that surround you that are living the quote unquote dream or just making it work, or at least appearing to make it work on social media, right? And so finding that blend where, my husband would come to grand opening events with me, right? Like my kids are coming to lifestyle video recording sessions, and they're like the kids that are running in the field, outside of one of our properties. Like it's about meshing them as much as you can so that you're spending time doing what you need to do from a work perspective, but that you're also being present for everything else that you need to.
What has surprised you about having kids?
Everything. I was never I'll say this. I was never a fan of kids before I had kids. Like, I tolerate kids. I love being an aunt. I love, hanging out with people. But I was also like, if someone asked me to babysit, I'd be like, okay. I guess, what time are you coming back? Do I have to change a diaper? What do they eat? I don't know how to handle, I don't know what to do. And so I treat my kids like they're little adults. And my husband does too. And so I think they're either going to turn out amazing or we are really messing them up. Because we don't baby them. I treat them like the second that they were able to understand things. Or
how old are they?
One is about to turn 8 and one just turned 5. So they're at fun ages, like elementary, preschool kind of age. But even when they were little, the second they could start doing something on their own, we were encouraging them to do it. If they fell and cried, we were like, okay, there's no gentle parenting happening at my house. And so I think the most surprising thing for me about being a mom is how hard that I feel like I can be with them, because I think a lot of people, once you have kids, you're just immediately you're going to they're so sweet and cute and you're going to let them get away with anything, and you're going to have little girls and they're going to be so cute. We don't let them get away with anything. So if anything, I think we're surprised at how tough we are still, but also how great they're turning out. Because you always worry a little bit that first of all, you're my kid's the cutest, but are they the cutest? And oh my God, you're so smart, but are you really smart, or am I biased? So I think that's just been helpful. Again, treating them like people and not just babies or toddlers or whatever else. That's been really fun. But it changes you. It changes your priorities, in the mornings, there were days when I would go into, my office job, and I work with people that didn't have kids, and they would be late to work, or they'd be exhausted, or they couldn't get their deadlines done. And I was like, do you have any idea how much I have done before 7:30 in the morning? Do you have any idea? I will not take your shit. You can wake up, you can get yourself dressed and shower, you can come to the office on time, or you can be here for a meeting and be prepared. I was like, there's a whole lot of other things. So that's just a random.
So going back a little bit, because I didn't get a chance to ask about this, but I'm super curious. To me, it's so cool in this industry how people start as a leasing agent and rise through the ranks. I think that's just so cool. What do you think makes somebody, why were you able to do that and others aren't? Because there's how many leasing agents? Tons of leasing agents. How do you, for lease, I guess people who are starting at the bottom and maybe just starting their careers, what advice would you give them?
Yeah. I started right after college. I was randomly applying to jobs, and I graduated in 2009, which was a really fun housing crisis. Nobody was hiring, and I was like, let's get into housing. So I started working at a student housing place, and then I worked at some conventional properties on site. And what I did on site as a leasing associate essentially was do my job and then do a little bit more. And that is always something that I talk about, whether it's somebody that's again, just starting as leasing or any field it applies to. If you want the next job and you want to be promoted, then go and do the job. Don't wait until you have the promotion or the opportunity or you're applying for it to do it. I kind of made a niche for myself. This was, again, the time where no one understood social. I don't think anyone still understands social media to an extent, but nobody knew, Facebook, Instagram had just come out. And so when I was on site, I wasn't just leasing apartments. I was like, hey, we should have a Facebook page. We should start building our brand personality online. And I remember I was one of the first properties to do that in our submarket for sure, and definitely at our company at the time. And so I was running that, and it started to get the attention of, people in corporate. And so then all of a sudden I started getting on their radar, and they started using our property as an example because we were outperforming, we were doing things that were creative and different, and I was a driving force of, again, coming up with those ideas and implementing them. And so I knew I went to school for marketing. I was like, I want to be on the marketing team. That's just what you do, right? You go to school for marketing, I want to be on the marketing team. And so me leasing and doing sales at the time, I was like, my end goal was always to get promoted to corporate and do marketing. And so I saw that opportunity as, okay, I'm getting their attention. They like what they see. Our property's performing. I just need to keep doing this and make those connections and network. And so when it came time again that they had a position open, they called me. And that's what you want. They want you to be, hey, we're just posted a position. We would love for you to apply for it. That's what you want. And so my advice to anyone, again, really any job, but especially if you're leasing, don't wait for the opportunity to start showing people what you can do. Show me what you can do, because if you can do that at one property, I know that you can do it for 3. I know that you can do it for 10. Now I know you can do it for a portfolio. Or if you're a mentor or a boss, if you've been promoted or you're the senior leasing associate, are you training others? Are you passing on your advice? Are you giving your time? Are you being a good team player? Those are characteristics that tell me, in a senior leadership role, that you're ready for something different and you're ready for the next opportunity. That's always something that's mindful. And also just be careful about, in the world of social media, your personal and professional life blends so much together. Be cognizant of that, right? Just because on LinkedIn you showcase yourself one way, very professional, here's my headshot, and then if I go to your Instagram page and you're just partying in Ibiza every other weekend, and that's your reputation on there, that gives me pause, right? So I think just being mindful of how people perceive you while still being authentic to who you are and doing the job that you were hired to do, and then a little bit more.
What is the future of Stitch Marketing look like?
I wish I knew the answer. Do you have a magic 8-ball? I can tell you that I've never been more fulfilled in what I'm doing in terms of the people that I get to work with and the projects that I'm taking on. That doesn't mean I don't have hard days and challenges and trying to figure out and navigate kind of what's next or how to be most helpful and whatnot. But I think that just figuring out that scaling piece, figuring out if it's something that I want to do or if I want to just continue to be, very niche and very selective on who I work with, because I definitely think there's a need for that. Or if there's a way that I can, leverage my experience and bring on some team members that also think the same way or feel the same way that can serve my clients best. But really, I'm a sponge right now. I am just still having so many great conversations with other entrepreneurs and other companies and businesses and learning and watching and seeing. This podcast is super inspiring. Again, we had a conversation a little bit ago, and all of a sudden you're doing it. And that's just again, watching other people's journeys, I think that will help propel me. And just being in a place where I can pivot and be flexible, I just never want to lose that. I don't want to ever grow so big that I lose that startup mentality and kind of doing the grunt work. I've really enjoyed over the last few months getting back to opening a marketing report and dissecting it, analyzing what this means, or submitting a lead online and seeing what happens. It had been so long since I had been in the weeds with it, and I've uncovered so many issues, problems, concerns, ringing the bell for a lot of really easy things for companies to be able to come in and fix their tech stack. They implement all these things and then everything breaks and nobody knows because everyone's on to the next thing already. And so I definitely see that need for support and auditing and whatnot growing. And so I'm just going to kind of ride the wave and go where the wind takes me.
Where can people find more about you, about Stitch Marketing?
Yeah, I have a website that I built myself, stitchedmarketing.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn at Dana Pate.
Dana, thank you so much. This was like really inspiring. You definitely deserve to be here.
Oh, thanks.
I love doing this because I feel like having these conversations is like me kind of looking at a portal with a bunch of doors, and I'm just like opening a door, and this is like another aspect of Dana. This is another aspect of Dana, and I think the listeners are going to be really excited and really appreciate you sharing everything. So thank you.
Yeah, this is fun. I appreciate it. And thank you for not ruining my makeup, making me cry. I was like really worried about it for a little bit.
That's awesome. Thank you.
All right, thanks.